So, this might come as a surprise to you, but A Christmas Carol is one heck of a story. And I think it might just be the most influential, impactful of all the stories ever written by our dear Mr. Charles Dickens. And it was, at the time, like, quite the impressive social commentary, in some ways, a call to action. And honestly, reading it in the here and now, the modern world, I must say, I was kind of expecting to bounce off of it a little bit, as Dickens obviously was not from my time period. I've grown used to my era's writing style and previous older world stories. I've had mixed feelings regarding. I love Bram Stoker's Dracula, for instance, yet I can barely stomach, say, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And yet I also enjoyed Beowulf and all sorts. There are just certain older stories kind of grate on me, and they seem alien, of a different world, in very weird ways. And yet I never got that with A Christmas Carol. Some other Dickens stories, certainly, but not really A Christmas Carol. Writing, obviously, is very old and very Dickens. That classic, perhaps overindulgent, maybe a tad long-winded, and yet nevertheless very engaging prose that you kind of expect. And yet, Christmas Carol never really grated on me in the same way. It's more impressive than anything, and I was certainly entertained by the story, the classic story that everyone knows by now. I'm not even going to bother to recap it because, I mean, by God, it's the same story that, I mean, you've watched, Mickey Mouse cartoons reiterating this story, and you've watched multiple animated movies and live action movies. One of them had Patrick Stewart in it. They're doing one now with frickin' Robert Eggers involved for some reason. And I'm not complaining, mind you, but it's weird. Um, and I will say, the prose did not bother me. The prose did not ruin my interests as I thought that it might, as I feared. And Scrooge, obviously, is quite the character, and I wish I could say the story is a lot different from what I expected, what I assumed from previous adaptations, but honest to God, Scrooge is the same bitter, evil old man that you kind of expect from all the adaptations. And, that in itself leads to a fascinating character study, right? Scrooge being such a petty, petulant little man. And yet you have to wonder, is he, by the end of the story, is he a good man? Was he ever a good man? And we don't exactly get an answer to that particular question. And obviously, Dickens has some very complicated views regarding anything and everything. Name a topic, and Dickens probably wrote 500 pages about why it's either good or bad or neither. I mean, he had weird thoughts about men and women and capitalism and Christianity and so on. But in A Christmas Carol, a short story, mind you, it's fairly short, all things considered, and there is this element of, while we definitely know what Dickens thinks about Mr. Scrooge, and we know what all the characters in the story think about Scrooge, um, all that comes across as secondary to the results of the haunting, right? Dickens doesn't waste time berating Scrooge for being an evil jerk. He not as much time as you'd expect anyway, and instead he kind of goes out of his way to show Scrooge the error of his ways through thought and memory, through empathy, right? And that's a very fascinating thing because it shows you how Scrooge became what he is, how he was warped by the world itself, and by the harsh realities of living, by his family's poverty and so much more besides. We see in Scrooge almost a dark reflection of ourselves, all our worst fears about the world and what we'll have to do to survive in it. We see in Scrooge the worst elements of human nature, uh, which is to say that desire for survival gone wrong. We see in him nothing more than another beast, as we've seen 1,000 times in the real world and in fiction. And usually he's the villain in these sorts of stories. He's a pure evil, malicious capitalist uh, monster, and here he is the protagonist, and a great protagonist he is, and a very well contrasted to various characters throughout the story, from his well-meaning nephew the, to the altogether admirable, shall we say, Bob Cratchit, who is, he somehow manages to provide for his family on the salary that Scrooge provides him, which I think is an indication that he must be a superhero. Nevertheless, and it is a nice touch, I think, that we are not necessarily even encouraged to forgive Scrooge in a way, like in fact, the ghosts certainly do not necessarily offer forgiveness as much as they do understanding and the ability to change, right? They ridicule Scrooge for being horrible. And we what we are encouraged to do, much like the characters in the story, is not to question Scrooge's sudden change of heart. I mean, I certainly wouldn't. I mean, if one day the billionaire from down the road just so happens to give me a small fortune to support my writing career and aid my, in this instance, imaginary, struggling family, then I am certainly not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, as it were. What the heck, right? I mean, A Christmas Carol is brilliant for that reason and a bunch of others. For the reason that that he takes old school magic and folklore and wraps it all together in a morality play in this really brilliant way. And sidebar here, the ghosts are like traditional ghosts, and how ghosts is just another word for spirit, and spirits they are, not the spirits of those who are passed from the world, but those who have never lived in it to begin with. They are semi-angelic specters, and the spiritual embodiments of the concepts of time, including the haunting specter that is the ghost of Christmas yet to come, who I dare say is invoking that good old fashioned fear of the unknown, the oldest and strongest kind of fear that we have. But I digress. Uh, yeah, the Christmas Carol is surprisingly brilliant. Who would have thought? It's almost like a story that's been shared generation through generation for what going on far more than 100 years, 150 almost. It's almost like that kind of story is good or something. Who would have thought? So, yeah. Bye.